Get your free copy of the complete tutorial at www.teachucomp.com/free.
To change the fill color and line or border settings of a selected image, click the Fill and Line category icon that appears in the Format Picture task pane to display the fill and line category groupings. You can click the Fill category grouping to expand it if needed and show the options you have for setting the selected picture's fill color. To use these settings effectively with images, the selected image must contain a transparent section. If the image is already completely filled with its own content, then changing these settings produces no visible effect. However, if your selected image contains a transparent background, you can use these settings to format the background area of the image. You can choose the No Fill option to remove any fill effect from the selected image. You can choose the Solid Fill option to fill the background of the image with the color you choose. You simply click the Color drop-down to select the color to use. You can then use the Transparency slider to set the level of transparency to apply to the background fill. Select the Gradient Fill option to fill the background of the image with a multicolor gradient. A gradient is a color that transitions in hue and/or transparency from one angle to another. You can choose one of the preset gradients by selecting one from the Preset Gradients drop-down. To make your own custom gradient, use the additional buttons and sliders to customize the gradient. You can use the Type drop-down to select the type of gradient to use: linear, which changes colors from one side to another across a straight line; radial, which changes colors starting from an origin point and then radiates outward in a circular pattern; rectangular, which changes color starting from an origin point and then radiates outward in a rectangular pattern; or path, which follows the path of a line that you draw. After selecting a gradient type other than path, then select the specific variation to use from the Direction drop-down. If you selected a linear gradient type, then you may select the angle at which the gradient changes by entering the desired angle in degrees into the Angle Spinner box. The Gradient Stop section lets you set the number and appearance of changing points in the gradient's color scheme. At its most basic level, a gradient must have at least 2 gradient stops. For example, if a gradient changed from black to white in a linear fashion, then it would have at least 2 gradient stops. You can have more if desired. In the Gradient Stop section, click a gradient stop to select the gradient stop whose properties you wish to set. You can click and drag one of the gradient stops left or right to change its position within the gradient. Alternatively, you can enter its position as a percentage into the Position Spinner box. Then use the Color drop-down to set the color of the gradient at the selected point. You can use the Brightness slider to set the brightness of the selected color. Then use the Transparency slider to set the transparency level of the color at that point. To add a new gradient stop to the gradient, click into the gradient line at the spot where you wish to place the new gradient stop. Alternatively, you can simply click the Add Gradient Stop button to the right of the gradient line. To remove a gradient stop, select the gradient stop to delete. Then click the Remove Gradient Stop button. At the bottom of the task pane, you can check the Rotate with Shape checkbox to set the gradient fill to rotate with the image if the image is rotated. Back at the top of the task pane in the Fill category options, you can choose the Picture or Texture Fill option button to fill the background of the selected image with a picture or texture. Textures are simply preset images included in Word. To apply a preset texture, select a choice from the Texture drop-down. To use a picture, click the Insert button to open the Insert Picture dialog box. Here you can either click From a File to insert a locally saved picture, click Online Pictures to insert a picture using the Online Pictures window, or click the From Icons choice to insert an icon using the Insert Icons window. Alternatively, note that you can simply copy an image to use and then click the Clipboard button that appears in the task pane to paste the contents of your clipboard into the background of the image. To set the amount of transparency to apply to the background image, use the Transparency slider. To tile or repeat the background as a texture, check the Tile Picture as Texture checkbox. Then in the Tiling Options section, you can set the Offset X and Offset Y options to set the amount of horizontal and vertical offset to apply to the tiled background image. You can use the Scale X and Scale Y spinner buttons to set the amount of the image to display in the tiled background. You can use the Alignment drop-down to set the alignment of the background image within the main image. You can then use the Mirror Type drop-down to select the type of reflection to apply to the tiled images in the background. If you uncheck the Tile Picture as Texture checkbox, you will instead see offset options for the image appear. You can change the background image's offset settings here. Use the Offset Left, Offset Right, Offset Top, and Offset Bottom spinner boxes to input the percentage by which to offset the image from the selected side. Also, to rotate the background with the image if the main image is rotated, then check the Rotate with Shape checkbox. To set a pattern fill for the selected image, choose the Pattern Fill option from the top of the Fill Options section. Then select a desired pattern to use from the choices in the Pattern section. Then use the Foreground Color and Background Color drop-downs to set the desired foreground and background colors to use for the selected fill pattern. The next category grouping in the task pane is Line. As applied to images, these settings change the appearance of a selected picture's border. The three options are No Line, Solid Line, or Gradient Line. To not have a border or to remove an existing picture border, choose the No Line option. To apply a solid colored line border to a selected image, choose the Solid Line option button. Then select a color for the line border from the Color drop-down button's palette of color choices. To choose from more colors, note that you can choose the More Colors command at the bottom of the color palette to open the Colors dialog box. This dialog box appears in almost all the places where you can choose a color in Microsoft Office products. You can either click the Standard tab and then select a color in the honeycomb of color choices, or click the Custom tab to select a color from the Rainbow Gradient, and then use the slider to the right to change its darkness or lightness. At the bottom of both tabs, the Transparency slider lets you set the level of transparency to apply. If you open the Color dialog box to select a custom color, then click the OK button to apply it. Note that you can also use the Transparency slider in the Format Picture task pane to set the transparency level of the selected line color. The options that then follow in the Format Picture task pane are the same for both the Solid Line choice as well as the Gradient Line choice. So let's first examine how to apply a gradient border line and then review the settings that apply to both solid and gradient lines. To apply a gradient line, choose the Gradient Line choice to view a different set of options at the top of the line category grouping. You can apply a gradient to a border the same way you can apply a gradient to a background fill. So these options should be familiar to you as we just covered them in the Fill section. You can use the same settings within the line category to create a gradient border. After creating your solid line or gradient line, additional line options that the two styles have in common then appear at the bottom of the Format Picture task pane. You can use the Width spinner box to set the width of the line in points. To apply a multi-line border, use the Compound Type drop-down to select the style of multi-line appearance. To create a dashed or dotted line border, use the Dash Type drop-down to select a style of line to apply. The Cap Type dropdown lets you change the appearance of the ends of lines. This setting is not often used when applying picture borders. The Join Type dropdown lets you set the appearance of the junction points where two lines meet. The last few settings are only used when formatting arrow shapes and will be grayed out and unavailable when formatting picture borders.
Like what you see? Pick up your free copy of the complete tutorial at www.teachucomp.com/free.